Well, Roger, welcome to this bite-sized edition of putting across some information on compensation systems and comp reviews. And first of all, I wanted to discuss with you comp reviews, because on around this time of year, depending which firm you're in, but there's quite a lot of comp reviews going on at the moment. Yep. There's quite a lot that go on around the start of the year, depending on the US firm, if you're in a US firm or an English firm. But you are someone who's been in the position of both as an individual, being on the side of the comp review, as well as a manager. And so I was looking at how you handle that conversation, and in particular the difference between being an individual in an English firm as opposed to a US firm, as well as a manager. So, how did you handle in the first instance your comp reviews as an individual, particularly at the English firm that you were at?
Yeah, and thanks, Freddie. So it's an interesting topic, I think, because people, it's highly personal for lawyers.
Yeah.
And they kind of a lot of lawyers, when it comes to this, are not very good at looking after themselves. They're very passive.
Yeah.
And there's it's them against the firm in some ways. Not everyone. I mean, we all know some lawyers out there who can be look after themselves. But a lot of lawyers in their DNA are not sort of negotiate like crazy for a client, but it comes to themselves, not so good.
Yeah.
So I think it's really interesting. As you say, I've experienced both the English Magic Circle tradition, which itself has gone through quite a lot of change.
A lot of change recently as well. Yeah.
Exactly. And the US systems as well. So I think that there's, in some ways, there's a limit as to what you can do in the room. And I guess a lot of it is positioning yourself ahead of those conversations.
Yeah. So I find that money should almost take care of itself. English lawyers don't love talking about it, but if you are getting to the position of it all going down to what's happening in the room, then maybe you haven't prepared yourself for that situation as well as you could. Did you find that actually the system of what worked for you is either it's an individual or a manager, that you were having those conversations a lot earlier? I noticed that at Paul Hastings that probably happened more than anything else for you.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think look, there are any number of different systems, as we'll come on to. But in terms of your contribution to that, it happens quite a long time. In some places before you even join. It's what am I looking to achieve at this firm? What are they expecting from me, and therefore what sort of compensation can I expect from that? I think that's quite important. As you're in the process, and again, different firms, and including the Magic Circle as well as US firms, will encourage you to have a fair degree of input as to this has been my contribution.
Yeah,
that's quite interesting, I think, because the forms that are provided for that and the input required, they vary and they can be quite subtle. And if it's working correctly, then you should be focusing on what the firm is telling you is important in that in terms of what they're going to remunerate.
So how I always find money is something that it's about respect. It's about how much respect will I get in the business, and that might drive your behaviour. It will either be things like client originations, to being a matter subject expert, to be sharing through international offices and so on and so on. You just got to work out the system, and then how much respect you'll get is the money you get back. Is I've got to play the game in this way, right?
Really, really interesting. I think there's two things in there. One is the what are they saying to you is important, and then what do you observe as being actually important? And it may be that firms, and I would say to firms, be honest about what you're saying to your partners. If you are going to, if you're expecting people to behave in a very collegiate way and lots of cross-selling and focus on all the sort of soft skills, that kind of stuff, and you say you're going to reward that, then fine, reward it. If you're going to say actually it's all about origination and everything else is kind of expected, it's a baseline, that's fine too, and it should be an honest two-way conversation. I think the other thing you say, it's about respect. It's so important, and many. I've heard many senior partners from firms I've been in, and other firms too, talk about the biggest issue they have is the conversation at the end, when it's published or when it's after the event. They'll say, I'm kind of happy with my number in the round, but I'm unhappy because it's less than that person, and so respect is a relative concept.
I'm much better than him or her. Okay.
Exactly. And what do I have to do to be like that? I mean, and the second part of that is not an unreasonable question. It's I'd like to understand why it is there, but it's the dissatisfaction of the fact that you're being paid less than somebody else.
Yeah, it's when looking into this, I was reminded of reading Liar's Poker by Michael Lewis, which my father gave to me as I moved to the city, and in that, Michael Lewis said that some senior member of his team took him aside and said, "Look, they're going to give you for your bonus more than you could have imagined getting, but once you do the maths on it, you might be disappointed because you've made the bank much more than you have." So in this in this context, I was reminded of what Lewis was taught of, and actually a law firm partner said this to me: have three numbers in front of you, one being astounding number you bite their arm off for, one fine you would live with, and one where you'd be exceedingly disappointed. And whatever you do, whatever number they give you, always look disappointed, and play the game that way. The interesting thing that this partner told me, and it worked for them, and maybe this goes on to you being a manager, is that he said, try and be empathetic. So when you get the disappointed look with your number, say, well, look, this must be a very difficult thing for you to do. You've got 100 of these conversations. That must be very tough. But from my perspective, be empathetic to me. I have ambitions at this practice, and I want to ensure that my contribution and ambition is matched by the firm. And so I would like you to go and wait and think about it, and can we have another conversation at some point, because I'm quite disappointed with that number. Would that work with you as a manager, or were there times which you thought went very well when you renegotiated, or times when it went badly?
Well, I can tell you, I learnt at I was a very young partner. I had experience on the other side of the table, managing an associate's compensation discussions.
Okay.
And in those days, actually, the fixed salary part was quite important. There was a bonus element, and it was discretionary, and it was sort of based on some factors, but also there was a fair amount of discretion there. I was in the room with a senior partner who I'd known very well over the years, and the two of us are sitting there, and we had tried really hard to reward this person. She was a star. I'm going to name any names. She is currently enjoying a very successful career in-house, and no doubt will remember this conversation as well if she's watching this podcast. But we're in the room, and it was in our mind it was a spectacular bonus, relatively speaking. And we sort of trailed it to her, and it was kind of, looking back, a little bit immature, and it was a little bit silly. And we kind of went to each other, and do you want to tell her? No, do you want to tell her? Knowing that she was going to be so delighted with this thing. And one of us told her the number, and she just looked at it, completely blanked us, and said, frankly, that's insulting. And we all sat in the room. Yes. So we all sat in the room.
Don't build it up.
Yeah, don't build it up. We all sat in the room, and it's that stuck with me.
Yeah.
And the lessons I guess I learned from that, a few things. From a manager's point of view, you just have to be straight. You have to say, we've taken into account whatever you've been doing, and the number we've come up with, and we've worked quite hard on this, is this number.
Yeah.
And that's it. Just no sugarcoating. Not too much placement of the whole thing. It is what it is.
Do the number quickly.
Yeah. It's out there. It's a fact. Get the facts out there.
Yeah.
There'll then perhaps be discussion that follows, which then takes me to the other side of the table.
Yeah.
Now that particular associate, that was quite an aggressive response to two senior partners.
That's why she's good.
That's why she's good. And was that the right response? I don't know. Did it help her in the future? I don't know. Which then takes you on to the next stage of the conversation, I think, which is what are you trying to achieve?
Yeah.
In those meetings and in those discussions.
Yeah. So it's a really critical part of your career trajectory, isn't it?
Yes.
Because it's a understanding of where you are. It's a KPI of where you are. Absolutely.
Where you are.
And as you said earlier, I think, of going, well, what's this going to mean for my conversation next year? It's really hard to do that because you're thinking, right, what this number is critical to how many toys I'll get, how much I'll pay off my mortgage, crikey, I've got school fees, or just had a baby, or whatever stage of life you're at. And it's really, and so if you could push that to the side a little bit and go, right, what's this mean for my career? And I should understand that in the run-up. we find that very, but we talk to lots of people around comp time, and it's kind of bad when they're going, right, I'm really annoyed.
Yeah.
We want them to have a great, deep understanding of where they are before the conversation. The people are very annoyed. They'll pay the bills. We're very happy to have them. Please come on down. But what would you say to yourself in that scenario if you had it again of the broad brush career now that you're kind of getting out of the game a little bit and then into our part of the world?
Completely. I think it's the I mean, not just in this context. I often sort of say to myself as a head of a conversation, whether it's with in this context or something else, is what are you trying to achieve?
Yeah.
And if you're just trying to achieve the fact of saying I'm really annoyed, and the person says, well, I can see you're annoyed, and that's annoying. That doesn't really take you anywhere. So so you have to think a little bit more strategically and a little bit more calm-headed about this. And then it depends. Well, maybe where are you? If you maybe at a part of your career where there's a gate to go through at some point, actually, that's probably what you should be focusing on and saying, look, is this consistent with me getting through that gate, for example? So, am I progressing where I should be? Back in the day as an associate, am I on track to be a partner?
Yeah.
You're a salaried partner. I'm on track to be in the equity. It's that kind of conversation, which is you use the number as a sort of opportunity to sort of put on the table what you want to achieve with this, and so I think there's that, and then at a more senior level, it's say, well, what does this mean for my practice? Are we investing in this practice? Am I going to be able to build, hire more lateral partners? Am I going to be able to do I have the budgets to go off and do what I want to do?
What's the business saying to me?
Yeah, it's a business. It's exactly that, and so it should be a sensible. I mean, you don't have to be soft about it, but you don't have to be rude or too emotional about it either. You can just be, just cool-headed. Yeah. What am I trying to achieve here as a business person in this context?
Yeah, and I think that pushes us onto another part of the conversation, maybe a smaller part in this context. But it's what does the system say for me? And you brought it up in the context of I've been an associate at this firm, and now I'm changing my role to become a partner, and it's very and having been an associate recruiter, and now I'm friends with those people that have been 2, 3 to 6+ years being a partner, is that they have felt that the firm has kind of changed around them, and often, like the Magic Circle firms, have changed entirely around them, because they were lockstep businesses when they first joined, and now they have a different compensation model, and that changes the culture of the institution. So we deal with firms that are lockstep. Big client of ours is Devereux Plimpton, and believe in the lockstep and guard it very, very tightly because it's a massive part of their culture. But then to the individual, the type of firm where it's gone from purely client originations to matter partners, really important, and we give that equal weight to shared contributions, to international referral work, to black box, that type of thing. How much and you saw two different cultures by pay, how did that drive behaviours? Or you spoke about the honesty factor. How do you feel it drove behaviours?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I remember being in a partner meeting once, and the partner stood up and gave a very entertaining but passionate speech about you get what you measure. And actually, just going back slightly, I mean, one thing you said there, which I think in our context is quite important, is you've known somebody as a recruiter who's been as an associate, and you've seen them through their career trajectory. I think there is something really quite important for an associate and then as a partner to have that relationship with somebody who kind of, you don't have to sort of reinvent the conversation. They know your background, they know your journey, they know what you're trying to achieve, and it becomes a very good trusted advisor relationship. So I would encourage people to have that conversation, that relationship from an early stage. Yeah. In terms of the getting what you measure and driving behaviour, I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, there's any number of systems out there and different ways of doing it. And I think that and this is why a third party, a quasi-independent third party, can help you recognise where what your strengths are. What do you bring to the party? And therefore, there's two questions. There's two aspects there. One is, what sort of place will I be happy working in? As a general matter. Yeah. And then secondly, and it is related, is what does a compensation system do in relation to what my achievements are?
I think that there's an alchemy there, because where would I be happy often based upon the individuals around you. The law firm market's incredibly fragmented, and there are lots of places that do what you do very well. Yeah. But the individual that's around you is a key element. the way that that firms pay, we are finding that lawyers don't quite understand that, because they're busy and they don't poke their head up and go, okay, well, how do they pay and how does that affect how they act as individuals? Some of that might be related to, you know, the trajectory of the profits that they're making as well, because you might be in a firm that goes, well, actually, you know, it's been going up, but it's not going up as much as those guys. How are they doing that? And that might have something to do with the comp system, but oftentimes it's got to do with focus on, you know, revenue per lawyer, for instance. And we've seen lots of examples of that recently, of challenging partners who go, well, I want to be paid much more. It's like, well, okay, but you've got to get your RPL up enough. Yeah. So it goes down to informing people. We want to keep people informed, as not only to what others are doing and what the people are like there, and go and have those, you know, don't just have those conversations with us, check in and have one or two conversations throughout your career with other firms, but informing them as to the comp system. Did you have a clue what other people were doing when you were at Linklaters, or was it just like, actually, I'm paid fine, I'm happy, thanks so much?
Within the firm, or
externally?
Yeah, no, and we've had this conversation before. Yeah. You know, I didn't speak to recruiters until, you know, much later in my career, and that's often a good way of understanding what the market looks like. So you know, I think there is something to be said for understanding your market. But I think there's a broader point. I mean, I think, you know, law firms are you know, businesses.
Yep.
And so really it's a question of how does that business put itself together? Yep. And I mean, to my mind, you know, I mean, the American. I mean, I just wanted to, you know, diss a whole segment of our legal community on the English side. The Americans are much more business focused, quite often than the English firms. Not entirely. It's a generalisation, but the transparency of it and what they're trying to achieve is often actually, you know, refreshing way. Actually, it's business like, which is fine. But then, you know, it needs lots of different, you know, ingredients to make the recipe work. And you saw that at, you know, at firms, you know, like the traditional Magic Circle firms. You know, I remember a partner, very well respected M&A practitioner, quite early on in his career, he recognised his limitations. He wasn't a very good technical lawyer. He would get people around him who were very good technical lawyers. He would not be able to achieve what he achieved without that support from technical people. Yeah. Technical people were probably quite happy, because actually they didn't have in their DNA quite the sort of the marketing sort of, you know, side of things,
origination side.
Exactly. And I kind of often think, you know, it's perhaps unrealistic, but there's a way of thinking about it. Is, you know, just distill it down as to, you know, if we were a high street firm with you know 10 partners, then everyone knows what everyone else is doing, and everyone knows what they're contributing to it. That's almost, you know, what we're trying to achieve on a much larger scale. Yeah. The systems are only a way of just making sure that happens.
Yes.
But so the question is, what are those systems going to look like, and how does it look? But as you say, for an individual, it's,
but it's I think we're both saying analyse that, and take the opportunity around comp time to analyse that and understand just a couple of other places of how they do it, and for the stage of your career, whether you've elevated into the situation where you're much more client origination person, or if you've always been a matter subject expert and that's all you want to be. Or for instance, you know, we deal with some of the boutiques and on the US side in particular, and you know, I met a managing partner the other day, said we were very happy to pay $40 million to someone last year because of their contribution on our formula. That's what we owed them, thanks very much. And you might go, well, I've got a mega case, how am I going to cash in on that? And you know, finally there's the black box system, which more and more firms are using these days. And in that world, they work very, very well if there's a huge amount of trust in the leadership. And you know, we are seeing a few firms being unstable at the moment when there's not enough trust in the leadership.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. The black box is an interesting. It's as you say, it relies heavily on, you know what, I'm going to just let somebody else deal with the whole conversation, and we're not having conversations about it. We're not sort of going to be in the canteen afterwards and having a bit of a chat about it.
And it works very well if that's the case.
Yeah, if the box isn't leaky.
That's
the other thing.
It's a good way of putting it.
Which I mean, it's a really important way of putting it, because actually, if people learn things behind it that then actually that destroys the fundamental concept of the trust of black box, which you say. I think that's I mean, it's a nice idea. Yeah. But it does require a good degree of trust. The other thing, in terms of what you just said, was the subject experts, and I come from an M&A background.
Yes.
But actually, we all know that people who are leading transactions or whatever can't do so without the key areas of support. And we've all seen, haven't we, some really quite high-profile hires in antitrust, in tax, and so on, financial regulation, and so on. These really important areas where they aren't necessarily. I mean, sometimes they are, obviously, but they aren't necessarily always the.
There's more support.
They can
areas.
be. They can be. And if it's primarily an M&A firm, that's kind of their understanding, I guess. So to say, actually, I'm coming along and I'm expecting to be busy because you, on the M&A side, are generating loads of new work, and I'm just looking forward to getting my teeth stuck into it, as long as I'm recognised for the fact that you can't do your deal without me giving that input.
But if you're treated as a second-class citizen, that's not enjoyable.
You'd be a foolish M&A practitioner or any lawyer, frankly, to do that. To treat anyone as sort of lesser being. And people, that sort of character quickly gets found out, and they find themselves finding it just a little bit harder to get the support they need on a Friday evening. Yes,
as my great friend who's a tax partner said, I said, "What do you want to be a tax partner?" He said, "Because I want to be the guy who, when hands some work at 11 p.m. Says, well, it's really complicated. I'm the only guy who can do it, and I'm going to do it tomorrow." So, hopefully that still goes down well. Anyway, look, thanks so much, Roger. That was very helpful, and I hope everyone enjoyed that, and look forward to doing another one of these soon.
Absolutely. Thanks.
Cheers.
Cheers.